Melvyn Douglas's character in Being There is just one of a pile of nincompoops, who think a certified moron is a quiet genius. But worse than him being that gullible, Benjamin Rand is dying. He needs blood transfusions in a room filled with oxygen just to keep Livin. But did he try caffeine? He could have put a whack of coffee down his throat and seen if that would revive him a little more. And if that rich old dupe was living in the now, live in the now, then he could get that caffeine from Spark Plug Coffee. They conveniently deliver their premium but affordable beans right to your front door, if you're Canadian or an American. And this stuff is worlds better than takeout. Oh, and Canadians, you don't have to pay for the shipping costs. Also join the Autopilot Coffee Club and get your orders as often or as rarely as you need them. You can even pause or cancel if you might need to, since sometimes you're forced to leave your house and go out into the cruel world and then maybe run for president. The website is sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Our HYES promo code will get you a one-time 20% discount. So brew with the best and find your new favorite. Bev, we definitely need to wrap up the year by talking about this bone-dry comedy. Play us in.
And action! Have you ever seen
Being There? Hiya, movie monkeys, and Happy New Year to one and all. We're one day from putting 2024 into the books. For us, as crappy as it was, at least it was better than 2023. We didn't have 2 dogs, an aunt, and a dad die on us this year.
Yeah.
I have a feeling 2025 is going to be much worse, so maybe we should celebrate the year we did have in 2024. Anyway, I'm the lunk in the yellow jams who doesn't mind doing yard work. Ryan Ellis. And here's my wife, who married me for my money, but then grew to love me for real, Bev.
That's me.
You're the Shirley MacLaine of this relationship.
And I am having an affair with someone who's intellectually disabled.
We are your commentators on this Classic Movies podcast, which, as always, will be packed with spoilers. This is the 636th show on this channel, and it's the 78th episode we've posted this year. All right, well, let's find out what each of us have to say about the coming attractions opinion question. Hal Ashby, the director of this film, had an incredible decade in the 70s. He directed 7 movies, which were nominated for 24 Oscars, and they won 7. And while he did make a habit of casting different people in the leading roles, he kept casting stars. So who do you think was the best of the leading men or women in those 7 movies? You got names like Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, David Carradine, not as much of a star, but in the 70s he was a pretty big star. Jane Fonda, Jon Voight, Beatty's sister Shirley MacLaine in this movie, and of course Peter Sellers in this movie. Who's your choice?
You didn't mention the actor who plays Harold and Maude. And Maude, of course.
Bud Corden and Ruth Gordon, not really stars.
No, not stars, but stars of a Hal Ashby movie.
True, and a very successful
70s.
one, very popular one, yeah.
I don't know why I mentioned it, because they are not my pick. I'm kind of unqualified to answer this fairly, because I've only seen 4 of those movies. But of the 4 I've seen, which are Being There, Coming Home, Harold and Maude, and Shampoo, it's an easy choice for me. It's Jane Fonda.
Great choice. Sellers is awesome in Being There. Plus Fonda and Voight were great and won Oscars for Coming Home. But I'm going to go with Nicholson in The Last Detail, because he gives one of his best performances in that film. Although anybody who chose one of the other stars won't get an argument from me, including you, with Jane Fonda. Excellent choice there, including the stars of Harold and Maude. They're very good. There's not big names. Of all those huge names, Beatty's probably not the least effective, but it's not his best role. Shampoo belongs to the women. Beatty's fine, but he's the cipher. As is Sellers in this film, but it's still a great performance. Okay, The Affable Idiot was released by Forrest Gump, before Forrest Gump, was released by United Artists 45 years ago in late December 1979, but that was to qualify for the Oscars. It got a full release in the first few months of 1980. As was true of a lot of Ashby's flicks during that great run there, people paid good money to see this, and it was a hit at the box office. But Bev, this film has been alive for 4.5 decades. Since it's that old, freshen us up, give us a skinny on Being There.
Peter Sellers is Chance, an illiterate, simple-minded, TV-obsessed gardener who, through a series of unlikely events, goes from being homeless to being a respected member of the upper echelon of American wealth and power.
In days.
Yes. Just through the power of his manners, of mirroring, of well-tailored clothes, and never saying anything more than what is necessary. Or,
in a nutshell, the dumbest man in America just might become president. Ahem. All he can do is mumble catchphrases and empty slogans. I say, ahem, again. I vowed to myself not long ago not to cover political movies as much. I forgot just how political this movie gets, but at least it's very funny. Okay, we got a lot of numbers to talk about. So the Rotten Tomatoes critics are fantastic about this movie. 95% of them think it's good. 59 are fresh, only 3 rotten. The average is 8.6 out of 10, and 92% of audiences. Roger Ebert had it 4th, and Gene Siskel had it 6th on their top 10 lists in 1980. Most of Hal Ashby's films are 80% fresh or higher, the ones he directed. And Sellers' big titles are 90% fresh, generally speaking. So Strangelove and The Pink Panthers, at least some of those, whatnot. His best titles are 90% plus. This was 24th at the 1979 U.S. box office. Kramer vs. Kramer was number 1. We covered that. That won Best Picture. Won Dustin Hoffman the Oscar over Peter Sellers and others, of course. Apocalypse Now was 6th, and Manhattan was 16th. We've covered all of those and more from 1979. There are only 4 films that went into the National Film Registry in 2015 that we've covered, at least of those 25. This is one. Ghostbusters, LA Confidential, and The Shawshank Redemption are the other 3. By the way, the NFR, National Film Registry, announced a couple weeks ago what will be inducted in 2025. So this is somewhat breaking news. And they added 8 movies that we've covered, but obviously they weren't in the registry because that just happened 2 weeks ago. The ones we've covered from that group of 25. Beverly Hills Cop, Dirty Dancing, The Miracle Worker, No Country for Old Men, The Pride of the Yankees, The Social Network, Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They'll join being there in the Library of Congress next year. This movie won 1 Oscar. It was for Melvyn Douglas for Best Supporting Actor, and Peter Sellers was nominated for Best Actor, but it was just those 2 nominations, nothing for the script or Best Picture or anything like that. Douglas wasn't at the show for this Oscar win or when he won for HUD. Brendan DeWilde, who plays Lon, I think is his name, in HUD, accepted for him. I happen to see that. You Google Melvyn Douglas Oscar, comes up with both of them. When he won for this, it was just, I think, Liza Minnelli accepting on his behalf, and that's that. I don't know why he wasn't there. And I think it should have gone to Duvall for Apocalypse Now, or even really more so maybe the youngest then, I think maybe still, competitive Oscar nominee in the history, at least of that category, maybe of any category, Justin Henry for Kramer vs. Kramer. He's so good as the kid in that with Hoffman. This was 26th on the American Film Institute's Top 100 Laughs. Sellers had 2 other movies on that list. Dr. Strangelove was 3rd, should have been probably 1st or 2nd, and A Shot in the Dark was 48th, while Ashby's Harold and Maude was 45th, and Shampoo was 47th. But what did you think of the movie?
I think it's fine.
I had a feeling you might say that. You did laugh.
I laughed. I chuckled. There's plenty to like about it.
You chortled.
It's really original. I love that it's gutsy. I always love a good dose of cynicism. But I don't know why. It just doesn't click with me. The satire's either too much or not quite enough. It's just grounded enough that it leaves me frustrated that the things that would simply never happen are happening. Whereas if it had a little bit more of an elevated reality, if they made it like 20% sillier, I would be more able to suspend my disbelief. But you love it. So why don't you tell me what you love about it?
Well, watching it now, I'm going to try to temper my thoughts because I don't want to rant and scream. It is maddening to think that intelligent people, and they are, could be this taken in by somebody who's not doing anything wrong. He's a nice person.
But do you believe that these people would actually be taken
No, but that's why it's funny.
Yeah.
And because it's consistently funny for the basically 2 full hours, there isn't very much time that goes by without a pretty good laugh. And belly laugh, at least for me, and I think you laughed about as hard as I did. That really helps. If you make a movie funny, even if it's about terrible things or about a horrible lead character, somebody you want to see strung up and dead in the sun, birds pecking at his eyes or her eyes. But if you make me laugh, I will go so much further with you. And this does that. No one knew at the time 2 things. The guy back in office in a few weeks, but also the guy who was coming into office. No one knew that, especially Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan's not a moron, but he wasn't some political genius either. And he was a catchphrase spouting kind of person. And what really happened during his administration...
He was an actor, right?
Giving lines.
Yeah.
And apparently this guy named Donald Regan, very similar spelling, but not the same name, really ran the government. I'm not saying Reagan didn't do his job badly a lot of the time. But it's just interesting to think, and they didn't know at the time, that he was going to come into power about a year after this movie came out.
And that he became overwhelmingly popular he still is overwhelmingly popular.
They love him, but they would never vote for him.
like-
If that's the exact same person back now, same policies, they wouldn't vote for him.
But if Ronald Reagan was running today, he would say and do exactly what the public wants to see him say
You're right.
and do. I don't know. I wasn't there. Well, I guess I was there, but I was a kid when Reagan was president. What I understand about him, what I think about him, is that, yeah, he was an actor playing the part of president and letting other people run the country, saying and doing what they want. And I'm sure he enjoyed being president and everything that comes along with that. But I don't really believe that he was a substance guy. Puppet is a strong word, but something to that effect. Was he a chance? No, he wasn't that stupid, obviously. I don't really believe for one second that somebody as stupid as Chance could go this far or become president.
As bad as some of this stuff is, and as scary as some of this stuff is, at the end, with all the pallbearers, these important guys talking about how this man they barely know, who's only been on the scene with Rand and the president for a matter of days, or maybe it's been weeks, I guess, but it's not been months. And they're talking about how he's the next logical person to replace the president who's currently giving the eulogy as they carry Rand's body, this very important donor and very important player in politics, to his grave, where it says, life is a state of mind. And that's the last line in the movie when the president says that in the eulogy. But this person who's so unqualified, who's shown no interest in politics, who's only said things that, okay, maybe people wouldn't realize why he's saying
history or background.
That's the biggest weakness in this entire movie, is that when the president's coming to see Benjamin, that was already planned, obviously, probably long before. But we see, I think it's supposed to be the head butler that gives the itinerary. We have a guest here. His name is Chauncey Gardner. And he hands over something, but there's no information on this person. Chance exists, although maybe Chance has nothing more than, like Ray Liotta's character in Goodfellas, my birth certificate and my arrest sheet. That's all there was.
Does he have a birth certificate? I don't know that he
might
does.
have that. That's what I'm saying, is he might only have the birth certificate and nothing else. Not
He
even
never
the
left
arrest
that
sheet.
house his entire life.
But
Why?
even beyond that, Chauncey Gardner doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
So the president doesn't come to some place. Well, maybe this rich guy he's known for a long time. They talk like friends. Bobby and Ben. Maybe, but I don't really buy that. That's the biggest weakness in the whole film. Because if you don't do that, then the president can't meet Chauncey, Chance, whatever.
Yeah.
And then spout the same slogans and have this all take off. If he says, I'm not going to meet up with somebody I don't even know, because he might be trying to kill me.
Ben is super rich. He surely is one of the president's donors. There are people out there who are wealthy enough that the president is bending their knee to him. If Ben says to him, this guy's going to be here, I want you to meet him. What's his name? Oh, it's Chauncey Gardner, but don't worry, I vouch for him. Do you think the president might be, especially in the 70s, although, like I said when we were watching the movie, it wasn't that long after the Kennedy assassination. There's always a threat, but I think that a lot of allowance is going to be given to somebody like Ben because he's rich, because he's connected, because they are kissing his ass. And he's the kind of person that not only has the power to say, tell the Secret Service to stand down, but those kind of people probably like to throw their weight around and remind themselves all the time just how powerful they are.
He tells them to have the president wait in the library.
Exactly.
So maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong in saying that that's a big weakness, because maybe that's a subtext in Jerzy Kosinski's screenplay, based on his own novel, by the way, his 1970 novel. And Robert Jones, who's an editor as well, worked with Ashby as an editor over the years, and I think he was involved in Coming Home as a writer or an editor or both, whatever. Maybe that's what Kosinski and Ashby are doing here, the subtext being that, yeah, viewer in 2024, 50-year-old guy, you're missing the point. They're cool with this because it's Rand saying so. Yeah, maybe you're right then. But that was my biggest problem with this movie. I just was literally, are you kidding me? They wouldn't let him.
It's like too much, even though it still feels like it's really grounded in reality.
Is
like
Sellers,
it's just a little too much
as good
for
as
me
Sellers is,
to buy
by
it.
underplaying, apparently basing his performance on Stan Laurel, who was his comedy idol, who was Mr. Bring It Down, because, of course, Hardy was the big one.
And everybody around him is providing the comedy. Shirley MacLaine especially. All the goofiness is everybody reacting to him.
Yeah, Sellers is funny because he's serious, but he's only really funny because they take everything he says as gospel, his aphorisms about gardening, and they think it means something deeper, especially when it gets into the political realm. That wouldn't be funny if he just said it. It's because of their reactions. Well, then again, he does have some funny moments down about the gardening. Using his remote on the black guys that confront him. That's a funny moment, one of the classic moments of the whole movie. Trying to change the channel when he sees himself on a TV in an electronics store.
A good way to illustrate to the audience,
funny.
like, this guy is not just regular dumb. There's something broken in his brain.
Because he's never left that house.
Understand the world. But He's such an interesting character. He's such a specific kind of idiot. It's not just that he's dumb or ignorant or sheltered. You compared him to Forrest Gump, but I would love to point out all the ways he's not like Forrest Gump. Forrest knows he's dumb.
Forrest is independent, sees the world, makes his own way.
Also, Forrest is an objectively good person who does the right thing, or what he understands the right thing to be, every time he's presented with a choice.
And also, he would never say, my name is Chauncey Gardner. People call me Chauncey Gardner. He's always saying, I'm Forrest Gump. That is actually one of the best things in the whole movie, though, one of the smartest things. When he's given some whiskey, straight whiskey, which he's probably never drunk before, although he could have had it, but I don't think he ever has. And he's choking because he drank the straight whiskey. What's your name? I'm Chance the Gardener, which he's told to many people now. I'm Chance the Gardener, but it sounds like, or at least McClane hears, because that's what this is all about. This whole movie is about these people hearing what they want to hear. Always. Chauncey Gardner. But all this comes from that one little moment, a very funny and smart
And he never corrects
thing.
them.
But that's, I guess, the dishonesty, not sinister
I don't think it's dishonest. I think he's just like,
fine.
too dumb.
Gizmo in Gremlins, I had the novelization of that, and I remember that line that when they call him Gizmo, which is not his name, before Rand. Oh my God, Rand Peltzer. That's the name of the father in that movie. Rand calls him Gizmo.
Is it connected? Obviously.
But in the novelization, it says something about how he just calls himself Gizmo because he can adapt and accept that fast. Much like Chauncey or Chance in this movie.
Does he know right from wrong? Well, we never really find out. He doesn't seem to even have agency over his life. He is like a piece of driftwood in the ocean. He just goes where the waves take him. He's completely innocently following along with the tides of life. He's just a total tabula rasa, right? Like a man with such a stunted inner life that he has no meaningful personality, which of course allows everyone to fill in the blanks and give him the personality they would like him to have. Something I really like about this movie is that it resists the temptation to make Chance a sympathetic character. Forrest Gump is such a sympathetic character. You love him. You root for that dumb idiot. You care so much about him. The fact that he's childlike and innocent in his stupidity just makes him that much more endearing. And it would be so easy for being there to take advantage of that. I think that audiences want to root for someone like him. He's such an underdog, too. And none of this is his fault. He's so childlike.
How did the old man keep him from ever leaving that townhouse in Washington? Look where this is. It's not like it's the ritziest townhouse of all time, but it's pretty nice. But he's apparently never left, and he comes out, and it's the bad part of town. I hate to say it, but the black part of town.
And with totally unkempt front yard.
Yeah.
It's like quite jarring to leave the sanctuary of this home that he has spent his entire life in. When he goes out the front door, it feels like he's on a different planet. And he is experiencing the world like an alien visiting another planet, or like a man watching a television show.
That's what this really is.
Yeah, literally trying to
He never really reacts, maybe because he's seen some crazy things on television over the years.
He likes to watch.
He never feels afraid.
Yeah. There's actually a pretty long moment when he discovers that television in the store that has the camera pointed out, and he sees himself on TV, and he's experimenting with his umbrella, trying to understand how he's on TV. He's trying to change the channel. It changes the TV behind, but not the one that features him. Do you think there's a point in his brain where he goes, oh, I'm in a TV show now? So when all these crazy things are happening to him, he just thinks, I guess I'm part of the TV now.
He might.
His world is so dramatically different than it's ever been. He's had the same life every single day, the same, just doing the gardening.
He's not useless. He does the gardening, but then Louise does everything else. She obviously washes all the clothes. She makes all the food. Yes, I'm very hungry. Yes, I'm very thirsty. He says those two lines many times in this film.
He doesn't have the agency to feed himself when he's hungry. The closest he comes is asking a random black woman, because Louise is black. So the first black woman he sees on the street, and he's like, can you make me lunch? That is a funny line. But it's also just kind of heartbreaking.
It's something you cringe about, but also you get why you'd ask her.
Of course, yeah. And it illustrates just how much of a mess he is. Do you like Chauncey? At no point am I like, this man deserves wealth and influence and comfort and admiration. I don't like him.
This is one of the things about movies that's interesting, is if you cast a likable actor, and he really wasn't, but a talented actor or actress who you want to root for, even if you find out that they were scum, which apparently he was a terrible human being, that helps everything. It helps every single thing if you want to back them up because of what you think about them as a performer. It sounds like Sellers was not actually those things, but because he was so funny, and he had a bad stretch actually, the 70s was not good to him. He was in his 40s at this point. He was only, I think, 50 when he died. The following year, this wasn't his last film because they kept making the Pink Panther movies after he had died. One of them, they culled together footage. It was almost like Plan 9 from Outer Space, where Lugosi shot a little bit of footage and then they pretended he was in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Or at least a big supporting player in the movie, and he wasn't a big supporting player in the movie. It was the other guy, the dentist who played him. They did something like that with Sellers in the Pink Panther, at least one of them, in the 80s. But because he was so funny in his best roles, really 3 things stand out the most, maybe 4. I didn't love Lolita, but he's the best thing in Lolita.
Yeah, actually agree. I don't like Lolita, but he is Claire Quilty. Claire Quilty is a creep.
Yeah, he's a terrible person, but he's great in the film. And of course, Strangelove was the next thing he did with Kubrick a couple years later. One of the greatest performances of all time. 3 different roles, so distinct. We know, we've raved about that movie 1,000 times. He's so funny in that. I think it was the same year as Dr. Strangelove. He did both Pink Panther and A Shot in the Dark. I'm a Shot in the Dark guy. I think it's a better movie than the first one, actually. It's funnier. But then you get all the way to Being There. Now, he did the Ealing movies before that, so he and Alec Guinness and some other people were involved in those films in the 60s, maybe 50s, actually. You've heard of the Ealing Studios?
No,
it's an English studio that made things like Kind Hearts and Coronets and The Lady Killers, the original Lady Killers. And I think both Guinness and Sellers were in several of those films. Very talented English actors, those two, and many others, too. So he had a broad career, did a lot of things, but really it's Lolita, Strangelove, the various Pink Panthers, especially the first 2, and then this. When he was on, he was Babe Ruth. He was Hank Aaron. He was Wayne Gretzky. He was Muhammad Ali as far as being a talented comedic actor. That's why I like him. I know it took a long time to get there, but I'm answering your question by saying that. If somebody's this talented, I'm going to get behind him because he's so good when he's in the great roles.
So you do like Chance.
Only because Sellers sells this so perfectly well. His tone is never off. People will say an actor never has a false note. And even in some of the great performances, and I said this, when did I say this? Last week on Meet John Doe. Gary Cooper was very talented. I wasn't his biggest fan because even in High Noon, maybe his best performance, he had some false notes. In this performance, there are no false notes except for one thing.
Which is?
The end credits where they put in him screwing up.
The blooper reel.
Which is funny when he's doing the, Raphael, you tell that asshole. And then him botching the takes and you hear everybody laughing and then the butler standing behind him. You see him at one point almost doubling over in laughter. That's funny. But Sellers was bothered by the fact that it broke the tone. And he's right because for 2 full hours, this movie is a 2-hour movie, he doesn't ever miss a note when it comes to his tone. And now suddenly, this great director, this outstanding editor too, Hal Ashby won an Oscar for editing in The Heat of the Night for Norman Jewison in the 60s. But it probably shouldn't be in the movie because it does ruin this tone. But otherwise, Sellers, for an hour and 57 or so minutes, is flawless according to what was written by Kosinski and directed by Ashby.
Yeah, for a movie that is obviously a straight comedy, there is something about it that seems to be ambitious and serious in its tone. We're making you laugh, but our point is dour.
Shampoo's the same.
Yes.
Shampoo's political.
He knows what he wants to do. He does it. He pulls it off. But God, what a massive mistake to have a blooper reel in the credits. What were they thinking? A blooper reel only works if you're making the silliest movie possible. There's something about Mary doing the buttercup thing. Charming.
That wasn't
totally
blooper reel,
works.
though. That was planned.
It was planned. Okay, but you know what I mean. Doing something silly that's very, very much breaking the
Grumpy
fourth
Old
wall.
Men. Grumpy Old Men did it better than anybody else did.
Sure, yeah.
And it was one of the first ones that I think
Pixar
that
movies
truly
do like
did that.
their cute take on it too.
We saw Bug's Life not long ago.
Yeah, I've always liked that.
You've never seen a Bug's Life before. That has a deliberately planned, of course, because it's animated, blooper reel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't hate the ending, but it's a mistake. The original ending, I guess, was he walks off when they're having the funeral. When Ben dies, he sheds tears. The old man, who he lived with for, I guess, decades.
Who's probably his father.
Well, okay, maybe, but whatever he is, no tears at all. Barely reacts. He sits with him, touches his head, clicks on the TV and watches it. That's a funny moment, too. All right, I have sat here for a few seconds. That's good enough. TV watching time. When Ben dies, he cries.
React, right?
He doesn't sob, but he does let tears out when he's talking to the doctor.
So has he grown? Has he changed?
He could be, but then when he walks off during the funeral of a guy he liked, but he walks off like he's 4 years old, because he is 4 years old, really. He has a moment with the tree, fixes that, because that's what he does. He's a gardener. Apparently, originally, Shirley MacLaine walks up and says something to him, and then the movie ended. But then somebody inspired Ashby to think about how, wait a minute, I'm going to have this guy walk on water.
They weren't satisfied with the ending, and they actually went back and they shot the scene where he walks on water because they just felt like it was missing something and it needed...
Presumably with the president giving the eulogy and those other guys whispering as they carry the casket and saying, who's the next presidential candidate? The president's a lame duck. Let's go with this guy, Chauncey Gardner, and we barely even know. Well, they don't acknowledge that, but they do barely know him.
You know what?
While MacLaine and Sellers are off walking by themselves, That would be anticlimactic.
I just thought of a perfect analogy for who should we pick? Let's pick Chauncey Gardner. That is almost exactly how Sarah Palin got the nomination for vice president. Nobody was right. People knew too much about them. Everyone was corrupted in the public's eye, and nobody was a satisfying candidate. And then she had this great moment where an interview went viral of her talking about her son in the military or something. And that time, I think she was the governor of Alaska.
Yeah, and she's a woman.
Oh, she's a woman, they like
guy.
that. Yeah. So they were like, okay, well, we need to diversify. We need to do something. We can't have two straight white men, old straight white men again. She just seemed perfect, and they crossed their fingers and were like, well, I hope she's the real deal, and she's as good as she looks. And she was one of the stupidest candidates.
Ask Steve Schmidt.
What was it called, Julianne Moore?
Game Change.
Game Change. Oh, a great movie and a great depiction of an absolutely insane thing that happened in American politics. Even by today's standards...
Got stupider.
It got stupider, but even by today's standards, I think you can look back and be like, I can't believe that happened. So, I should stop saying that it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Or another one I would think of is Rick Perry. That's another good example.
Yes.
How did somebody this dumb get this far just because he's a tall white man with all his hair? Or, oh, look, they put him in glasses.
The world's his oyster.
Stupid. Yeah. That's my favorite from 30 Rock. So sorry, we were talking about him walking on water. What do you think it means? Or do you want to talk about the various interpretations? Because even Hal Ashby has been a little cagey. We just did it.
I think it's supposed to be, well, the movie satire, so it makes sense that would be satire too. I don't think you can take that literally, even though this movie is very literal.
Yeah.
Everything else could have happened. They live in a giant mansion. It's not like they're doing anything sci-fi. But let me bring up something that I've always thought about. Roger Ebert, my favorite film critic, I've referenced him many times. He said in his review of this movie that he did I think, shot-by-shot analysis of this movie.
Yeah, I think he taught it when he would teach.
He did a lot of those, yeah. He's walking on water. How could that be? Well, maybe it's a hidden pier. His review says something about how I thundered...
I wrote the quote down because I knew you wanted to talk about this.
You say the quote. I don't have it, so...
He said, the movie presents us with an image, and while you may discuss the meaning of the image, it is not permitted to devise explanations for it. Since Ashby does not show a pier, there is no pier. A movie is exactly what it shows us and nothing more.
I don't agree at all.
I agree mostly.
I can believe whatever I want to about a movie, and it's okay if I'm wrong. Now, as for what actually happens in that scene, he's not Jesus, but that's what they're playing on here.
It has to be a Jesus reference. He's walking on water. It's begging people to call that to mind. It's obviously a Jesus
But the
comparison.
Jesus of the Bible is not stupid, and this guy is illiterate and stupid.
Well, is Chance Christ-like? It is an inescapable interpretation. I would say in the context of this movie, it's not so much flattering towards Chance as it is an insult to Christ. Maybe that's the point he's making, that many of our lionized figures, like Christ, are just lucky idiots who had the superpower of allowing everyone around them to see exactly what they wanted to see. I'm not saying Christ is a lucky idiot, but I am saying there's very little historical record of who Christ actually was and what Christ actually said outside of the Gospels, which were written generations after he lived. Kind of like King Arthur. There are records that King Arthur existed, but the story became a reflection of what England or even France, just the times needed King Arthur to be. And it's the same with Jesus. I love the line, if Jesus were resurrected and saw what people were doing in his name in the year 2024, he would never stop throwing up. It is demented how people will turn Jesus into their own tabula rasa.
They'd string him up and kill him.
Or he would be disgusted with what people use his image and his name and his teachings for, assuming that his teachings were his actual teachings. While I am an atheist, if you look at just what Jesus taught, they're my favorite of all the religious teachings. I grew up culturally Christian.
They're great lessons.
He was a great figure, but I also take the parts that I like and ignore the stuff that has been interpreted this way or that way by people I disagree with. It's all a tabula rasa. I also think it's kind of an expression of Chance's luck. I mean, his name's Chance. This idiot can walk into a lake in December and not get wet. There's just nothing he can do that will fail, so much so that God himself or whatever, a magical hidden pier, whatever you want to believe, will stop him from falling into the lake, even though he was stupid enough. It's funny, he walks into the lake, and then he's like, how come I'm not up to my waist
sticks his
in
umbrella
water.
in there.
Sticks his umbrella, like, what's happening? You thought that you would just get wet if you walked in the lake?
Funny thing if Eve had walked out too and just went right down, at least up to her knees. I never gave a lot of thought to the ending, what it really meant, because I did read the review that Ebert wrote when I first saw this, I think, whenever that was, at least 20 years ago, maybe more. And I was always bothered by his interpretation, a guy I respect so much, and I thought, don't tell me what I can think or not think about this.
Outside of that, what was his interpretation of the ending?
You read it.
I think he was inviting people to interpret it the way they like, but he doesn't like logical explanations. There's not a pier, there's not ice under there. There are people who are like, wait, but there's stepping stones. There's no way that's what Hal Ashby,
there actually
the
was
director,
when they filmed it, but story-wise,
it's a special effect.
Yeah.
But there's no way Hal Ashby wants us all to believe that, you know what, there was a hidden pier, stop overthinking it. It's like when people ask Zemeckis about Castaway and they say, what's in that box? And his joke is like, well, a waterproof satellite phone fully charged. Stop wondering what's inside the box. The mystery is the point.
What's in the Pulp Fiction?
What's in the suitcase? It's a mystery for a reason because they're inviting the audience to think on it and to come up with their own answers and maybe to discover what it says about them.
I'll tell you what I think that absolutely is saying.
Give me the answer.
He's the president. This isn't just about those guys saying he will be their candidate. This moron who knows nothing, nice human being, but lucked into all of this,
he'll keep winning,
is going to be the president, and God help us all.
Because it could be like Forrest Gump, where you're like, that guy just can't fail. Or it could be like The Omen. Oh my God, this guy can't fail. What do you make of the fact that he is so perfectly neutral?
It's pretty smart. It actually would be interesting to think if this guy was on social media today, because you can go online and say, good morning. And somebody who's having a bad day will say, but I'm having a bad day. How dare you say good morning?
This is erasing people who have bad mornings.
Right, yeah. So even if you say the most innocuous thing online, you can be torn to pieces. So yeah, he probably wouldn't trend because of that. You would think this would expose the fact that the real power players in America were rich people all along. It's always been true. Our real problems are not the immigrants, not the trans people, not the women, obviously, not the black people, not the Mexicans. It's rich people who blame all those groups for all of our problems. And these people carrying that casket, and Ben himself, who talked about wanting to lower taxes so he and his friends can make more money.
Yeah.
He's not saying
I'm not against tax
he
cuts
seems like a
for
nice
the
enough
poor.
Guy. You know what's funny, too, is that we happened to watch, because I think I was the one that said we should watch this movie. I haven't seen it in a long time. It's 25 years old now. Magnolia. And the Partridge family, so Jason Robards and Julianne Moore, this relationship is the same basic thing. And funny enough, you got a redhead as the younger...
A kooky redhead.
...woman who married the guy for his money. And both of them admit it, too. Julianne Moore has a far more big breakdown about it, but she admits she married him for his money, yet she came to love him. Shirley MacLaine says that about Melvyn Douglas. I married him for his money, but then grew to love him. Whenever they're together, she's either the greatest actress as a character of all time, or she actually does love him.
She actually loves him.
I think she actually loves him, and just as Julianne Moore supposedly does in Magnolia. So these are not unsympathetic men in that sense. They seem like they have at least one person that truly loves them, even though it didn't start out that way. That's almost more pure in a strange way, isn't it? They had to earn the love that wasn't at all pure at first, and it became pure. But still, what they're really doing, because Partridge in Magnolia is not a big businessman, he's an important television executive, but he doesn't care about people through most of his career, and now maybe at the end, more so. Rand doesn't really. He's selling stock at the end, one of the last things he ever does. But then also tells his doctor that because of Chauncey, I can die. It's much easier to die now. And he'll go off and be with Eve. This guy he's known for literally days. He wants to be, I guess, the new husband of his wife, which is also odd. He's seen no real connection with the two of them. She has the masturbation scene, which was funny, and it's cute, and it's actually moderately hot. MacLaine sells it. She's a great actress, so she sells it very well what she's doing. I forgot how long that goes on, too. It's not like it's 5 minutes, but it's not just 3 seconds. You don't see any hand motions, but you can tell what she's doing.
I've only seen 4 Hal Ashby films. In 3 of them, women's sexual pleasure is like a big
thing in
deal.
Coming Home.
Huge thing in Coming Home.
Shampoo.
She says that it's the first time she ever had an orgasm, and her performance of an orgasm is strikingly convincing in Coming Home.
What's the 4th movie?
Harold and Maude. And I don't recall the sex scenes being very graphic in that. So I'm saying that's an exception. 3 of the 4 that I've seen.
But those two are in bed together, and it seems like their relationship is good.
Yeah. We don't know whether she had an orgasm or not, because I think it's too wholesome. It's not really relevant the way it is in these other movies, but it's interesting that he's interested in this. And in the 70s, especially in the 70s, people probably were interested in the fallout from the sexual revolution.
So what do you think of Melvyn Douglas as Rand? Because it's a good performance. Quite good. He's better in HUD. He won the Oscar for that. He probably deserved that more than this. I think it should have gone. I said that already to Duvall or Henry or almost anybody else. Because he's solid. He's good in this movie. But then again, his character's so key because when he's caught up in this guy that she brought home, and it's not like she has contempt. That is an interesting touch, actually, because when the limo driver hits him with the car, it's because Chance backs into the street when he's looking at the TV shots of himself. And she takes him into the back of the limo, and she's nice to him. He drinks the booze, says his name in a way that she thinks is Chauncey Gardner, and takes him home. She doesn't have contempt for him. A lot of movies would have her being contemptuous of him, but Ben Rand is always into him. I don't really know why. Maybe because he's nice. Maybe because he seems
same reason everybody is. Because,
look how well he's dressed.
Yeah, there's even like a concept in psychology. If you want somebody to like you, you mirror them. You literally repeat what they say to you. It's active listening, and it just makes people feel more at home. And there are studies that have shown that people like me who never shut up, talk a lot in big groups, and definitely let everybody know exactly who I am. And then there are people who are quiet and much more reserved. And studies have shown that when you meet somebody and hang out with somebody and you don't get to learn about their personality, if they're just more reserved like that, you make assumptions that they believe the same things that you believe, that they like the same things that you like. You assume without being prompted to, they are more like you.
He does the handshake the president does on television with the president. And at first the president, Bobby's thrown off by it, but then buys into it pretty fast.
He respects him. And he just doesn't say very much, and the less you say, the more people believe you agree with them. So he repeats what they say, or he just gives them these platitudes that mean nothing. So a platitude is like a horoscope. You can attribute any meaning you want.
Growth in the spring.
Growth in the spring. And they're like, exactly. We should just be patient with the economy.
Cut those taxes.
Get better.
Cut those taxes and then everything will grow.
Right. Yeah. You just got to deadhead the flowers. You just interpret what you want, the more vague it is. So that's why they like him. And it's not flattering to Rand. We like Rand. Rand is a likable character, but he is arrogant. And he's self-absorbed. These are people who are clearly out of touch. They just see that Chance is wearing these tailored clothes. Actually, it's a very believable turn of events.
He's older, ends up with middle-aged.
He's older, middle-aged. He's a tall white man with all his hair. And he's got gray hair. He's kind of distinguished. He has good posture. He dresses in his old boss's, I guess, but I think it's his father's old clothes. Man, as they call him. There's the old clothes that he had in the attic. That's where he got his clothes from. They fit him because he's his father, so they probably were the same size. So it looks like well-tailored, high-quality clothes. They even have the Secret Service looking at where those things were tailored, and they're like, this is a rich man's clothes. Yeah. And that's all it takes to convince people. So I don't think it's a really flattering depiction of Rand. And same with Eve. All it takes is for him to say nothing, and then they
fit in. Yeah. You know, a key line at the end of the movie is when the president gives the eulogy and talks about how he was born into wealth. Rand was born into wealth. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's doing. Doesn't mean he's stupid. Doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to be successful. But would we know his name if it wasn't for the fact that somebody else, Rand, gave this money to him?
No, of course not. It reminds me of Remains of the Day. The difference between the upstairs, downstairs, this very rich family, and the staff that takes care of their castle of a home.
Lord Darlington, yeah.
Lord Darlington
inherits this money.
He inherits this money, and that inherited money inherited him also this wild sense of entitlement that he should have a say in how the country is run.
How Germany's run.
Yes, and that he makes all these decisions that in the end completely ruin his family because he was wrong. It's World War II, and he's basically meddling in all these things about how they should treat Germany. And in the end, he messed up. That movie has like a lot of scenes about how these rich people feel that they ought to be running the world, but they're just born rich.
We've really found this out in recent... Well, I guess some people knew this all along, but I've found this out in recent years. Not only do people look like me with my body parts and my genitalia run the world, but it's unimpressive straight white guys. We would never know their names politically or nationally or in a big way if it weren't for the fact they had money and power from the start. And I guess that's true about Chance. And that is such a key thing at the end with the president that it's also true about Ben, who maybe learned how to do business and be good at it. But what did he inherit? Maybe they had 5 castles and he's down to 1 castle now, and he blew it all.
Absolutely.
And Eve is nice, but the movie's implying that she just slept her way into his... I said to you during the movie that Shirley MacLaine, not the most beautiful woman of all time, looks great in this, though. She was, I think, mid-40s at this point, or early 40s. She's one of the only women in the whole thing. Well, Louise is a key character, too. But McClane's very solid in the movie and often very good. And then at the end, this know-nothing moron is going to get this woman that he has a connection with, I guess. But
Does he?
Well, look at that scene. She walks in, he kisses her because he's watching the Thomas Crown Affair, which Ashby edited, the actual movie.
That's so cool.
He edited that movie. But then as soon as that kissing scene ends, he stops kissing her.
Yeah.
Another great laugh in the movie because he doesn't know what else to do. But then she does the masturbation thing. I guess Olivier, as in Laurence Olivier, was offered the role of Rand, and then he turned it down because of that.
A bit of a prude. And while she's doing that, she can't see him, but he's just doing yoga.
Yes, because he changed the channel.
So he just does whatever's on television. Maybe because, like I said, he thinks he's part of the TV show now, so he's just trying to go along with what he sees on TV.
So this is Truman Show before Truman Show in a way then, too.
Yeah, it's got that.
Although
that
he doesn't
kind
know
of
he's on TV.
Yeah, it's true. It's the opposite. He thinks he's on TV when he's not.
The ultimate cipher.
We don't know what's going on.
People have always said about Keanu Reeves and some other actors too, but Keanu's maybe the best example of a cipher in The Matrix. Funny you say the cipher, and yet
an actor who can just be a total blank slate for the audience to relate.
Joey Pants' character in The Matrix is Cypher, but he's a cipher in that movie, and Point Break and Speed and some other films he made, especially The Matrix, though. And maybe Sellers' character here is an even better cipher than any of those.
Except he's like an alien. I don't find him relatable at all. It's interesting to see the world through his eyes because he has that child's or alien's eye view of everything around him, and it's all new and strange to him.
Well, true. It's funny because you talk about The Matrix and Point Break, and I guess even Speed, and the Keanu characters are very accomplished people. They're just Keanu, so they're not exactly seeming like the brightest people in the world. Yeah, this guy, he's illiterate. He cannot read. It's not just, I like to watch TV, as he literally says to people, oh yeah, I prefer TV too. Yeah, books and reading is out. But it's because he can't even do it. It's not a matter of I prefer television to reading. I can't read.
He isn't lying. He's not being remotely deceitful. It's just people hear what they want to hear. So he doesn't say I can't read. He says I don't read. Or sometimes he says I can't read. Or he says I can't write. Oh, who can? Oh my God, writing, what could be harder? We'll just get ghostwriters to do it for you and then you can proofread it. I can't read. Oh, who has the time to read anymore, buddy? I know exactly what you're talking about.
Hey, Hilma, way to get Marge pregnant. Thank you. I do enjoy working at the bowling alley.
Exactly. Although, honestly, if I met somebody and they told me straight to my face, I can't read, I would not think they're illiterate.
They literally can't, yeah.
Especially under the circumstances that these people meet him.
Because we assume that everyone can read at least a little bit.
There's two middle-class characters in the movie. There's the estate lawyer who first meets Chance and basically tells him, you have to leave this house. You're kicked out. Chance has no meaningful reaction. He just seems to placidly go about his day and get carried along with the tide.
Key line in the movie, 2 key lines. I see. And also, I understand. He never really sees, and he never really understands.
But I love the touch that when the lawyer and his clerk, whoever, the woman who's with him, when they meet him, they see right away that he's developmentally disabled. Later, they see him on TV talking about politics, and his assumption...
I know that guy.
I know that guy. And he doesn't go, hey, what's that idiot doing on TV? He says, what was that smart guy doing trying to trick us into believing he was an idiot when we met him weeks ago? He trusts the TV and the people who put him on TV more than he trusts his own perception. And then you have the doctor, the other middle-class person in the movie, who catches
upper middle, but okay. Yeah.
Sure, upper middle, but in the context of the movie, a servant. He works for them.
He starts to get it.
Very much an employee.
He knows who Chance is at the end and wants to tell Ben, but Ben doesn't want to hear it because he says, it's much easier to die knowing that Chauncey's around.
Yeah.
So then the doctor has a look on his face, and it's very brief, but Richard Dysart, the look says, I can't tell him now.
And he hesitates a lot. He knows for a long time, and you can see that he
suspects for a long time.
He suspects for a long time, but he's not like he goes to Ben. Because think about it. A, this is his boss.
And his friend.
You never want to be the person to tell your boss, hey, you're being made a complete fool of. And it's his friend. He doesn't want to embarrass him. He seems to care about him and like him, but he doesn't want to hurt his feelings. And then eventually, it's almost like Ben tells himself, listen, I'm dying. He makes me feel better. And then that decision is made. What is the doctor going to do now that Ben is dead? Well, he would humiliate his memory. He would humiliate his widow. He would humiliate the president of the United States. If I'm the doctor, I would be like, let them find out for themselves.
Louise could out him, but Louise has no power.
Well, Louise knows nobody will listen to her. She says the point of the movie is trying to make, which is, well, there you go. A white man can fail his way all the way up there, to, even though he's an idiot.
Rights for brains.
I can't remember how she words it, but she basically is like, all you have to be is white. That's it.
You have to have some kind of access that most of us don't have, but yeah.
But he doesn't have that access. He gains it.
We won't have that access to our Prime Minister.
We just haven't been hit by the right limousine yet, Ryan. Get on it.
But that is well done that he's hit by a limousine because he's watching television. I like to watch. All right, well, then the cast here. Peter Sellers, we didn't say this, but he's on the spectrum, right? We didn't call it that then, or Asperger's. I don't think that was even known to be...
Oh, you think that Chance is on the spectrum?
Seems to be.
I thought he was stupid. The story I invented in my head is that the old man, the rich man that he lived with, slept with one of his employees,
maybe
knocked
Louise.
her up. Well, if it was Louise, I don't think Chance would look the way he does, but knocked her up, and then to keep it a secret, they had the birth in the house, something went wrong, not enough oxygen to the brain or something, and they were like, well, now we're really in trouble, let's just never let this child leave the house.
But it's speculated, I think, that he's on the spectrum. Okay, but he's also...
Okay, I've never heard that. I wouldn't have thought that.
But we've known a few people on the spectrum, and they're not illiterate, which he is. So that's true. You're right. You know, the only time we've ever covered one of the great comic actors of all time, and great actor just in general, was in Dr. Strangelove. But it's one of the most incredible performances of all time, so if you're going to only do one time until now... That's the right one, and this is probably his second best work. Well, maybe 2 or 3 times as Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther films. And he died of a heart attack less than a year after this came out. Then Melvyn Douglas died in 1981, so they're both gone in only a couple of years. Shirley MacLaine lives on, though. She's still going. She was in The Apartment, so good in that with Jack Lemmon, and she won the Oscar for Terms of Endearment in 1983. Those are the other 2 times we've covered her in the past. I don't think I mentioned her last week talking about the Coming Attractions trivia or opinion question, because she's not Sellers MacLaine. It's Sellers top billed, and then Shirley MacLaine lesser. Fair. And her character's not that vital to the movie, but she does a good job with the role they wrote for her. Melvyn Douglas won 2 Oscars. We've covered the 2 films he won for, HUD and this. He was also in Ninotchka, which we covered earlier this year. He's so good with Greta Garbo in that. And then The Candidate, he plays Redford's dad in that. And he's also Ileana Douglas's Pop. And apparently she was on set.
She's in it?
No, she's not in it, but she was on set, and she apparently was a big Sellers person. And I guess this movie and being around Sellers made her...
Who is she?
In To Die For, she's the sister. She's Matt Dillon's sister.
Oh, love her!
And in a ton of things, yeah. She's in Goodfellas, too. Tommy's girlfriend at one point as well. I mentioned Laurence Olivier could have played Ben, but so could Burt Lancaster. He was Ashby's first choice. Richard Dysart, who is the doctor, and this was also the doctor in The Thing. So he's the one that plunges his hands into the thing and then loses them and dies in that scene. And he was in 171 episodes of L.A. Law, which I never saw, but that was such a big show, so that's why I thought I mentioned it now. Jack Warden's the president, President Bobby. Oh, we didn't mention, by the way, the first lady and her horniness, but he's impotent.
What was the point of that?
Yeah, I guess we have
She's the horniest first lady in American history. And it doesn't imply
that he doesn't want to do it because he's cheating on her. He's just having problems because he's an older guy, I guess. It doesn't really say why.
I think it's just supposed to be for comedy.
But he's watching Chance on TV, and I think he's evaluating the fact that, this guy's become a real player now, not knowing that a couple scenes later, whatever they're supposed to be, a few days or a week later, some of his people basically are saying, well, you're out. We're going to pick this guy on television who doesn't know anything, that's talking in gardening metaphors. But anyway, Jack Warden. So he was in From Here to Eternity, 12 Angry Men, All the President's Men, The Verdict. We've covered all those before in this podcast. And also he's in The Replacements, which Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies. Dave Clennon, the lawyer that Chance meets early on. I like to sleep with the bed facing west, but this bed faces north. I see. So Dave Clennon is that lawyer. He was an Ashby regular. He's in Coming Home, which I covered last year. I don't recall who he is. He's also in The Thing with Richard Dysart and Gone Girl. Don't recall who he is in that either, but we covered that earlier this year. So we've seen a lot of Clennon the last couple of years alone. Coming Home, Gone Girl, now this. And then Ruth Attaway, with those great big eyes, is Louise. And she appeared in My White Whale. I've never seen it. It's the only movie on any AFI list I've never seen, because it's on the Passions, I believe. Porgy and Bess.
And you haven't seen it because it is next
to
impossible to find a copy of it. Yeah. And all the copies that exist are apparently just god-awful,
terrible looking,
terrible print.
Not the full length, that kind of thing, yeah. But she's pretty good as Louise, and talk about the truth teller. And then we don't see her again after that one scene where she says, like you said, about how a white man can succeed in America as long as he is white. Hal Ashby directed so many good movies in his career, but they were all in the 70s, I think, because the 80s was not good for him. I don't know what really happened there. I've mentioned Easy Riders, Raging Bulls over the years on this podcast, that book. Towards the end, it becomes this whole lament for him and how his career went. But in the 70s, Last Detail and what was it called? The Landlord, I think it was before. I didn't mention that one. I forget who's in that one. But Harold and Maude, Last Detail, Shampoo, Bound for Glory, that's the Carradine movie, Coming Home, and this. What a decade. Coppola was awesome in that decade, and Marty was awesome in that decade, and Altman was. A lot of people were. But don't forget about Hal Ashby. And we have covered Harold and Maude, and I covered Coming Home by myself last year. Jerzy Kosinski wrote this, based on his own novel. And the producer was Andrew Bronsberg, who worked for, I guess, Polanski, because he produced Macbeth and The Tenant. The movie's 185-1. We own the DVD, but watched it on TCM, and especially at the beginning, had some major tape hiss. It was for a good long while. Maybe it's our speaker.
Then why would it have gotten better?
I don't know. The cinematographer was Caleb Deschanel, Zoe's dad, and also, what's her name, Emily?
Yes.
6 nominations for the Oscars for him over the years, but no wins. He shot The Natural. That's a beautiful movie, even though I'm not the biggest fan of some of the things in it. And The Passion of the Christ, which is also a beautiful-looking movie. The editor, Don Zimmerman, cut Coming Home for Ashby and Galaxy Quest. Also, Over the Top, Rocky 3 and Rocky 4. So I've covered all those movies in one way or another, because 3 of those were on Scoring at the Movies. And the composer, Johnny Mandel, there's not much of his music in this movie. It's very little, but still, he composed MASH and The Verdict, and also scored Caddyshack, which Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies. But really, this movie is about the classical music in the opening when he turns on the TV and sees them playing whatever that music is. But then also, no, that's later on, though. When he walks on his own, you see him walking down the median in D.C., walking towards the Capitol building, I think it is. And you hear that more funky technical version of also Sprach Zarathustra. And then also the Basketball Jones thing that he watches in the limo, I think it is, which is Cheech and Chong, and also George Harrison's involved in that. Basketball Jones! So we said this on Eyes Wide Shut. You've got the dun, 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 and then the bing, bing, bing. Baby Did a Bad, Bad Thing. And then you've got the Shostakovich Waltz. Such different types of music in that one movie. Same with this.
And apparently this was all a direct homage to Kubrick. Sellers was in 2 Kubrick movies, one very famously, of course, in Dr. Strangelove. There are people who make a connection between this movie and 2001: A Space Odyssey. I find it maybe is a bit of a stretch, but could be an homage. The TV is on a moon set, and they find the monolith on the moon. Not really sure how the 2 movies connect, if I'm being honest. Feels like they have pretty disparate themes.
They do. Anyway, what do you think of the look, the cutting, and, well, the music you just said?
Technically, it's very good. It's of the 70s.
Ashby probably always edited his own movies. Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, they talked about, in fact, that he would just live in the editing suite. We watched Andy Garcia on TCM because we saw it that way, and I think it's Ben Mankiewicz is the host. We only watched the end part. We didn't watch the intro. And Garcia said about how he was, and I know this was true anyway, lived in the editing suite, basically, which was true when he was an editor, but I'm sure it was still true when he was a director. So even though Don Zimmerman cut this and other people cut other movies, I'm sure Hal Ashby really cut at least some, if not a lot, of his own films.
I'm sure he micromanaged what was going on in that edit suite. Some directors are going to be more hands-on than others, but if he used an editor at heart, it's a really well-edited film.
Despite the fact it's 2 hours. It's this very solid pace, and I said before, consistent laughs. It's not like the last 20 minutes, there's no laughs. There's less, because the guy does die, and for all of Rand's faults, we like the guy.
I think it could have been shorter. I think it was Ebert even said, the story with the president and his wife. What is that there for?
Oh, true.
I guess it's supposed to be jokes. Maybe it was funnier in the 70s. It was funny to us, too, but there are certain things where it's like, does that add anything?
Ashby was a randy director, though. I think every one of his movies, at least the ones I can think of, had a very sexual theme. Shampoo obviously does. Mm-hmm. Last Detail, Nicholson's character is talking about rogering a lot, as I recall. I haven't seen the movie in a long time. Coming Home, you talked about the great sex scene, and John Voight's character talks about being horny all the time. So maybe that's why Ashby got it into here, because there's no real sexuality from Chance. Eve tries to thrust it upon him, if you will. But other than that, there's really no sexuality. Maybe Ashby felt, well, somebody's got to be, so, President, you're the one, but you're impotent. And your lady really wants you. Mm-hmm. What happens next? Well, I guess Chance ascends into heaven because he appears to be Jesus. Well, with all the walking on water and such. That, or he does become president. And God help us all. And this is all made a joke, but an affable idiot did become president the year after this came out. That's Reagan. Look at his policies, and we know what might happen again in a few weeks.
A less affable idiot.
Anyway, last thoughts on being there.
I guess I wish this movie wasn't so distant. It keeps me at arm's length. It's a great intellectual watch. It's certainly interesting, really fun to talk about, really fun to read about and think about. But it just doesn't sing for me. Can't totally put my finger on why.
It's the ultimate in projecting onto a blank slate what you want to see. These supposedly intelligent people, maybe they're not that bright to begin with, even the president.
They're just rich. Doesn't mean you're smart.
Maybe that's what Ashby's saying.
Rich and confident and a white man.
But they make him fit the narrative that they want him to fit. But it helps that we laugh so much. Sellers is brilliant because he maintains the tone until those end credits. But he's not worthy of any of this stuff, and he's going to be president. But I still laughed, and that's the real key. So that was how we saw Being There. Thanks a lot for spending time with us today and for the whole year. We broke our personal record for podcast postings with 78. That's one episode every 4.5 days. And of course, the reason we did give you so many shows is because I did a lot of monologuing, especially in October. I did something like 4 or even 5 solo shows, maybe even 6, I forget now. Will we keep up that pace next year? I don't know. I'm not going to promise anything, but there are another zillion movies we haven't reviewed yet. Although we've covered 636, so we're getting there.
Although I do have another foot surgery to go through.
Right. I'll be doing more monologuing in, I think it's going to be March, maybe only March. Probably not April. Anyway, we had some great feedback and support this year. We had some crappy feedback and insults too, which comes with the job. But we just hope you listeners get something out of this whenever you do listen, whether it be the day we post or weeks later, months later, or years later. We appreciate you spending any time with us at all. You can't do something like this for 11 years, soon to be 12, unless people care enough to download your show. So we appreciate that. And Happy New Year tomorrow. Be very safe and have very much fun. We're having the gang over to our house, so we know we're going to have a great time. And don't drink and drive. We'll be back on January 6th. Oh no, January 6th. This was political. Anyway, just coincidence. Our first episode of 2025 will kick off the 10th annual month of Bev. Her first choice will be the biggest box office hit of the Coen brothers' career, True Grit. The dude is a one-eyed cowboy. I like your eye patch, dude. The coming attractions trivia for True Grit. Jeff Bridges was nominated for an Oscar for playing Rooster Cogburn in the 2010 True Grit, while John Wayne won an Oscar for playing Rooster Cogburn in the 1969 True Grit. But did Jeff and John ever appear in a movie together?
All right, so for the answer to that question, check out our January 6th episode about True Grit. You already know how to find us, and like Ryan said, we love to hear from you guys, even if you're annoyed with us. We love your feedback. We love your thoughts and questions. You can find us both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis. Ryan is at MovieFiend51. I'm also at Bev Ellis Ellis on Blue Sky.
There's no at.
Right.
Bev
Ellis Ellis on Blue Sky.
And you're at Bev Ellis Ellis on Threads.
Threads. I never check Threads. Who are you on Blue Sky? What's your name on Blue Sky?
Ryan-Ellis.
There you go. You can also reach us by email. Have you ever seen podcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and a review. And you can find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
Oh, the podcast is over? I see. And I understand.
You don't understand it all, do you?
No, not really.
And cut.